time is that I just love to throw it open and say to, has anyone got anything they desperately want to know about, and see whether I can offer a solution, or see whether I know anything about this subject at all. I mean, it would be nice to just find out where you guys are at.
Mark, don't you want to jump in with a question, an icebreaker?
Well, it's one. I've known Trevor. Trevor and I have known each other for 35 years.
38.
38 years. Okay. I'm going to ask you a question that I've never asked in 38 years, which is, how do you deal with a project that you committed to do, but you don't actually like? And I do remember, if you don't mind me saying, is that you got into one of the Hannibal Lecter series. Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
And you hated the footage and you hated the content so much that you walked away from it. And I respected that hugely, and I'm just wondering how you deal with that.
Well, I've walked away from more movies than I've supported. And that doesn't, I don't want that to reflect on me being difficult to work with, because my engineer will tell you I am difficult to work with. But no, seriously, I try to kind of get to the nub of a movie before I have to fall in love with this thing. Because basically, you spend a hell of a lot of your life, you're sacrificing it. 7 days a week, 18-hour days, you're sacrificing your personal life, your private life, you're inconveniencing your family no end. The whole thing has got to be a dedicated commitment. And in order to do that, I read the script of this Hannibal Lecter thing, for instance, and movies that I've sat, they've flown me to Los Angeles or to New York, and I sit there, look at the movie, and I have to pluck up the courage to say to people, look, I'm terribly sorry, but either the movie didn't turn out the way it read on paper, or I really can't, I'm not your man. I'm not going to be able to commit to this thing 110%, because I don't feel it, I can't, and I think to a certain extent people are happy with that. They don't want a half-hearted job, they want 100% commitment to that product.
Yeah.
And if I'm working on a picture and I've read the narrative, I've read the screenplay, and I've looked at the director's interpretation of that story, because my job is to put my perspective on his take on that story. So it's quite a process. If I worked with another director, the score would be different, because it's his take on the same story. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? So every time I work with a bunch of people, it's a different permutation of the creative forces involved, and I have no hesitation at all in saying to directors and producers, thank you very much indeed. By the way, I enjoyed the flights and the film. I hate flying, and thank you so much for your time. And leave. Because whether that company or that studio offers me another job, again, really at the end of the day, and this is the trump card you have as an artist, it doesn't matter. If you're not scoring it for money, and if the kids are fed and clothed, and your jeans is going to last another year without falling off you, then what the hell, life's too short to waste on stuff that you don't have time for. But I have done it on, I can think of half a dozen movies straight off, where I haven't regretted for a moment not committing to it. Because it's not fair on the people. They're spending millions and so much time and energy on it to bring on a guy that's got the name, but he's not going to commit 100%.
Leave that to Henson.
Questions, friends. And when you're getting up, also during the day, introduce yourself to one another. There's some iconic musicians sitting in this room, and journalists and everything else. Find out who's next to you. Just say who you are so Trevor and Mark can chat. One of them right here, Theo Cross, Springbok Nude Girls. Give him a round of applause.
Hi.
So I'm a big Alan Parker fan, massive.
Me too.
And,
Me too.
so you did Mississippi Burning, you did Angel Heart.
Yes.
And did you do any other Alan Parker?
Well, thing is, I taught his sons. I was their mentor. They're both fabulous composers, film composers. The thing about Alan Parker is he could have been an amazing composer. He's a fabulous musician, innate. You know, he did everything from Bugsy Malone, Commitment, you name it. Alan's ability, Evita, I think he directed for, what's his name, Mr. You know, the one that Jesus Christ. See that? Everybody else is trying to remember. It's not just me in my old age. No one can remember Lloyd Webber.
We've all worked hard to forget.
He was a contemporary of mine at the Royal College. We were, you know, we used to be on these quiz competitions together. He won, actually. So there you go. So, yes, getting back to your question, the fact is that the fact is you kind of have this. Sorry, your point was what?
Alan Parker.
Alan Parker. You kind of have this amazing regard for a director who is so skilled. I mean, look at the range, the genres of his film output. And he was 90 towards the end of his life and was head of the British Film Institute. I had the good fortune to work with him because he has an instinctive response, innate response to that image and what music would work to it. So I wanted to avail myself. I wanted to find out what it is that he wanted in the music. So in a way, we worked out what I'm writing about now. One of the aspects of my book is the toolkit system. How do I produce a way in which Alan can sit back and say, do you know what, I don't like this sound, or I don't want this, or the melody does this, where you totally 100% can do what the director wants without forsaking your own musical identity. And that is a very difficult line to walk, because at some point you think, oh no, he's taking over my creativity or whatever. But at the same time, you get an insight into what it is he wants. And my ambition has always been to work with directors and for them to find out what it is they feel they want, but then to step back and create something that blows them away. There's no point in bringing me on a movie if you think you're going to get another cliffhanger or another this or another that. I want to do something original, and I just find it very difficult when you're dealing with a sorry. Sorry. I find it very difficult to actually sorry, my train of thought's been derailed by that lady in the corner. So to work out a system of being able for a director to put his input into my process was a phenomenal thing to try and work out without, as I say, losing your integrity as an artist, or selling or kowtowing to somebody just being a yes man and saying, oh yes, I like what you're doing there, or I like what you thought about this and the other. So to stand back at the end of the day and produce something that people say, oh my God, you know, I thought it was going to be good, but this is, to break the mold, to take a genre and say, you know what, horror movies work good. Mine is going to be a sweet tune sung by a little girl, and it's going to scare the shit out of me. So that's breaking the mold. It's taking a genre and saying, you know, this is the way everyone thought. the last, film is only 100 years old, young. You think of the other art forms, the novel, the theatre, whatever. And we are at its inception. We can do all sorts of things to make it go in every direction you can think of with the technology of computation and digital, whether it's audio or visual. The world is our lobster, oyster, any kind of shop. It's just formidable what the potential there to do is. And basically you can, you can be anything you want in life, except younger. I think that's about it. But I feel with Alan Parker, that was a privilege that very few people get, and which I also, you see, all these big guys were always incredibly nice people. I mean, fundamentally, you think, God, I wish I... And visionaries, this is the other thing. It was great,
Can I give a Alan Parker story?
Come sit here.
No, I'm not. So, I started working with Trevor before the Alan Parker experience, and Trevor, you've done Dark Crystal, and that being your defining, and that's what I spotted in you. Trevor was my second signing in my career.
Who was your first?
Why was Mars? Colourbox. So you were my second signing, and you complained at the time that there were big projects swimming around and sniffing around, that you were always too busy to do them. So I remember sitting you down.
Too picky?
No, too busy.
Oh, really?
You were full of small TV this and commercial that and a TV commercial and a
anti-apartheid commercial.
And I sat you down and we went through the diary and crossed out all the non-essential stuff, and that was all fee earning, so it was all putting food on the table and paying the school fees and everything else. But we then cleared a gap that allowed us to go out and find you a big movie. And so, and this is the Alan Parker part, is that I learned about Angel Heart, realised they were looking for someone. I thought the Dark Crystal score was such a masterful score that I sent it to him, and I got a very good reaction back. So then I made a mistake. I was only 23, 24 years old, which was over-pestering.
3 years older than me.
So he reacted really favourably to Dark Crystal and showed interest, so I started reading it.
So what came first? What came first in Angel Heart? Da 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 da.
You are the girl in my dream.
Yeah, was that the start of the score, or because that is the song that recurs through that sound?
That's the theme, yeah.
Yeah.
But if I can
So
finish,
did you write the theme and then build on the theme?
Sorry,
or?
the blank look on my face is, this man's asking me questions about 45 years. And I'm only 60, I'm only 53. No, I'm trying to work out, the girl in my dream. Basically, I think I came across the tune, and I said to Alan Parker, this is such a wistful tune. And he said, I think we're doing pickups, we're doing shoes, whatever, let's just seed it into the movie. And so I think that's how it came about. But I don't recall being, looking for a theme. I think these things just kind of bubble up to the surface.
Because it ends up like
Just a solo piano.
Yeah.
Bing, bing, bing.
I'm going to finish my Alan story. Because the point being was that I over-pestered Alan Parker, and he started saying, we're really interested in Trevor, but please, you don't need to ring every week. We'll get to it. And then eventually my last conversation with Alan Parker was, Mark, fuck off and leave me alone. We're going to use Trevor, but stop pestering. And that's how Trevor got the job.
I owe this man, but you know what? I'm brought in here to experience this wonderful world, so its payback is over. I don't owe him anything anymore.
One doctorate and two grandchildren.
Oh, you can have a lot. No, but seriously, Alan Parker was an anomaly, a different director. I've had that good fortune with about 4 or 5 others. Andrei Konchalovsky, on a picture called Runaway Train, brilliant Russian director. His brother Mikhail Konchalovsky, another phenomenal Russian. My Russian is pretty rusty, if at all, but the two of us got on like a house on fire. He was at the Moscow Conservatoire studying with his contemporary Vladimir Ashkenazy. They were both students together. And I said to Andrei Konchalovsky, how did you become a film director? He said, because that bloody Vladimir, he's too talented. He said, and I want to be the best. And he plays I would never be as good as him on the piano. So he became a film director. And that's his story. But, you know, again, someone who could look over your shoulder. Gary Kurtz, the Star Wars producer, was my producer on Dark Crystal. Again, looking over your shoulder at your score and saying, the trombones in bar 42 are a bit, it's very risky writing, isn't it? You think, bloody hell, you're looking at my little, you know, and you have these guys who know their stuff and who are, and at the end of the day, I'm sorry, but I take it as a great compliment. If they know what I'm doing, they are aware that, you know, of the quality of the stuff I'm producing. Whether it becomes commercial or sells in any event doesn't matter to me. I mean, I just come back from Abbey Road a few days ago, as you know, having remastered tracks for 7.5 hours of orchestral music I recorded on the Dark Crystal. It's celebrating this year's 40th anniversary. So the Hensons, this Jim Henson and the family said, you know, it would be lovely to commemorate 40 years of Dark Crystal. Have you got material that we could use, apart from reissuing the original soundtrack? Well, in those days, you could only put 20 minutes aside on a vinyl, as you know, because of the needle, the spacing of the needle and so on, and cutting. So I looked at this, all my work has been digitized, by the way, which is 6,000 tapes, and is in the archive of Leeds University in the Trevor Jones library. I've got to say that, 'cause, wow. Even I'm going, wow. You've got a library of all my crap over the years. Outtakes, everything, all the notes, all the letters to my producers, all my conversations, everything. Because of my academic background, my wife kind of always piled everything up, boxed it up, and then Leeds University got a grant from the Arts and Humanitarian part of the government. I mean, we can't feed our own people, but they're giving us £570,000 worth to take care of my staff. And I'm thinking, you know, this world is something not quite right. But I'm grateful, because you can go into those archives now, which I did, and I listened to 7.5 hours of symphonic orchestral music that I recorded over a 2-year period for Dark Crystal. And I had to just reduce it to 3 CDs worth, and, you know, tracks, I don't know how many tracks, just for streaming offline. And then the 3 fans I have in Germany are mad about the vinyl cutting. So I said, well, you know, let's do this. So I went back, having targeted exactly what music I wanted to use for the commemorative album. But I was sitting in Abbey Road with this mastering engineer, and I thought to myself, I was hell-bent on producing what I wanted to produce 40 years ago, and I stuck to it. And today, I can really see that music and be incredibly proud of the fact I didn't stint. It wasn't a X-budget move, I don't remember anything about it. The only thing that's right is the quality of the music.
I came and joined Trevor in Abbey Road just for a little bit during that work. and the first hour he'd spotted a glitch. Firstly, it sounded magnificent up on the big speakers, and there it was. But he'd spotted a glitch, and for an hour they were working out how to de-glitch effectively what would have been a 2-inch tape transferred to digital, and there was something in it. And you know, I've spent my life in music, and I've spent my life in studios and working with. I could not hear this glitch. I couldn't hear it. I didn't know where it was, but no, Trevor, he spotted it, and
they don't call me Battiers Jones for nothing.
that's the level of perfection we're dealing with.
Well, no, you know, the thing is, at the end of the day, whatever you leave behind, it's like a bad curry that comes back to bite you in the bottom 40 years later if you haven't got it right first time.
More questions? James.
Thank you, Martin. Hello, James. So you signed on to the movie, and day one. How do you make about this hour and a half or hour and a half
of music?
Of music. And what's the first step? How do you approach and deconstruct the thing and turn it into this magnificent voluptuous?
Well, the thing is, I read the script because it's the screenwriter's intention and the structure of his narrative that the director's taking and just putting his perspective on. The director's just a storyteller, but the originator of the story is the screenwriter. It's his idea. So everyone has to kind of, you know, people say, oh, you're this kind of composer, that kind of, you work for a director. No, I'm working for the storyteller. The director and the screenplay writer are storytellers. The director's telling the stories to the screenplay, to his eyes of that narrative. So, getting to the nub of the emotional weight of the script, finding out what the hell is this guy trying to make me as an audience feel, and then trying to look at that narrative and say, oh, in this scene, I can do this. I can enhance the emotion here. I can manipulate the parameters of music because of my training, because of my background, because of the way in which I've equipped myself, my little toolkit, okay, to manipulate the parameters of music, whether it be melody, to write a great melody to accompany the mood of the film, or whether I'm changing the harmonies, the rhythm, all the things that go to make up our perception of what the construction of music is about. So when you have a crafty, skillful composer, you should be able to at the end of the day, take a loaded black dot, like I did with Angel Heart, on a piano and go ping, 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 and you sit there and say, oh, it's not the London Symphony Orchestra 110-piece choir, orchestra with a 200 choir, you know, it's an out-of-tune piano. But does that do what that screenwriter wanted to evoke? Yes, it does. So, how to approach is to measure, to find the geography of the emotional content of that story. Because at the end of the day, we're all storytellers, whether we're musicians or whatever. We're telling an audience a story, we're entertaining people in a specific way, whatever our craft is. And that ability to understand your craft and know what you're doing, to have your toolkit and understand what the pneumatic drill does, or what this does, or the way in which you've amassed knowledge to solve a problem of scoring. So it kind of evolves. If you look hard enough, the movie dictates what it needs. And my lovely old professor at York University, Liz Lutchens, whose father was, an amazing architect. Lutchens, I don't know if you guys have heard him, one of Britain's top. He did all the Houses of Parliament and God knows, India and all the colonial places and so on. Her father, she was a fantastic composer. She did all the Hammer House of Horror shows to feed her family. Again, a woman nobody's heard of. Hammer House of Horrors would never have been a successful series if it wasn't for the music of Liz Lutchens. Why? Is she not known? because she is not known. She's a woman.
Yeah.
So, you know, like female composers, Clara Schumann, God
Yeah.
knows, much better pianist than Robert Schumann, by the way. So anyway, I go off at a tangent. But, you know, that's my thing. If you have a wife like mine and daughters like mine, you learn to respect the women in your life. You know? So I find it very extraordinary when you have a story to tell and you have to enhance that story. And the ability to change the harmonies, to change the instrumentation, the color, to do whatever you can by way of manipulating your craft to bring out the best in that storytelling process. As I say, whether it's as complex as a big orchestral symphonic rendering, or whether it's just a simple piano or simple guitar, is irrelevant. As long as it's evocative and as long as it brings out the meaning of the film. And that's the objective, to bring out the meaning of the narrative. It's not to glorify yourself or play your main theme, whether, you know, which is what we tend to do when we're John. Thank God I'm not John Jones, but it's John, the Johns. I don't know if you know the Johns. I love them. But you can hear them coming on in every film. When you listen to a Trevor Jones score, you kind of think, who is, weird. But it's different from the last film. It could have been written by another composer, because that's not the way I don't impose myself on a film. I try to bring out what's inherent in the story. It's what I want to think is the modern way of scoring movies. You're not selling your ego. You're trying to enhance the product. And you know, Liz was always, I used to do Saturday with her. She had a study on campus opposite mine. I used to have to walk across the pond. We had a lovely pond. And I say this because I used to call back to my study at the end of the Saturday afternoon, because we consumed quite a lot of whiskey during the course of the day. And, you know, drinking during the day is not terribly good for you. However, the stuff that I learned from that lady is still with me today. Because when you work at that level and you're totally unrecognized, the humility, the amazing artistry of this person was just mind-boggling. I learned so much from her. So, including, you know, that if you don't give your whiskey a splash of water, just a splash, it doesn't really bring out all the aromas.
Thank you. One more small question, if you don't mind. Do you get stuck ever? And if you do, how do you dig yourself out of that?
You mean looking at a blank piece of paper?
Yeah.
No, I look at the film. I don't get. I mean, I'm still that 5-year-old that went to see Charlie Chaplin in Limelight. I'm gobsmacked. And then you read, oh, he directed, he shot it, he acted, he did, you know, and you think, or the Bridge Over the River Kwai, when I was kind of behind the seat in the Avalon Cinema, thinking, oh my God, you know, this is an amazing experience. I mean, that was cinema in Woodstock. That I played truant for 2 years from primary school. My mother would think I was off to school, pardon me, but I would get through the lavatory window, sit there, and as I was saying on that film, the fact is that you learn when there's no sound on the film how important the sound is. So in those days, it was the same program over and over. Your feature film, your documentary, your newsreel, your cartoon, or whatever. And then it would be a whole program played every day, over and over again. The same cinema. So if you experience the same film the following day, but there's no sound, or the day after that, there's no image, and you listen to the sound, you're actually educating yourself in the relationship between sound and image. And you know, how many times do you watch a horror movie? My wife is extraordinary. She reaches for the mute button, takes the music off, and you see this guy going, you know, and you realize that the sound and that music is having a physiological effect on your perception of that narrative, of your understanding of that film. What is working on you is that composer is coming from his heart through those speakers, subliminally to you, and dialogue's covering it, sound effects covering it. But with sound, you know, if you're in a horror movie, you can shut your eyes and cut off the image, not the sound. That music permeates, whether you're aware of it or not. It comes from my heart, goes to your heart via all this technology. And that is a very powerful position to be in, because you can either make or break the dramatic in terms of the film by knowing what you're doing or knowing how much weight to give a scene. You can go overboard. The whole damn thing is so soppy, nobody going to forget. You know, Hugh Grant and what's her name, Julia somebody. You know, you can make them fall in. They hated each other on set. They couldn't stand each other. But you know, there you are. You hear Trevor Jones going, and the other one says, "Ooh."
Great chemistry.
Great chemistry. The chemistry is in the music. I'm sorry to say that. The chemistry wasn't on set. So there we are.